Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, after years of speculation, President Joseph Kabila will not flout the constitution and run in DR Congo's elections in December. Instead, former Interior Minister Emmanuel Ramazani Shadary will represent the ruling coalition. Also, there are growing concerns about a crackdown on opposition figures in Zimbabwe in the wake of last week's disputed presidential election. A top official in the MDC party is denied asylum by Zambia after he flees there amidst mounting claims of harassment by the state. And in Burkina Faso, we take a look at Lake Buku. It's one of the country's natural water reservoirs and is fast drying up. That's due to climate change and drought, and threatening the lives and livelihoods of tens of thousands of people. But first, after years of speculation about whether Congolese President Joseph Kabila was angling to stay on in power well beyond the two-term limit, DR Congo has its answer. On Wednesday, just hours before the deadline to register candidates for elections that are due in December, Kabila's ruling party announced that they would be represented by former Interior Minister Emmanuel Ramazani Shadary. Kabila had been due to step down in 2016 at the end of his constitutional mandate, but stayed on as elections were delayed. Fatal protests erupted over concerns that he would try to run for a third term. He'd faced international pressure to stand down, but choosing Ramazani to follow him is a defiant move. Thomas Nicolon tells us more.
Joseph Kabila chose one of his most faithful collaborators, Emmanuel Ramazani Shadary, the former Interior Minister, currently chief of the PPRD, the ruling party. He is now the government's candidate for the December election.
I want to sincerely thank, before the Congolese people, God Almighty for his blessing. And most of all, the moral authority of the Common Front for Congo, His Excellency, President Joseph Kabila Kabange, an exceptional man in Africa and across the world. He kept his promises. He said there would be no trouble, no third mandate. Today he stuck to his word.
A few opposition leaders say that Shadary's designation is an important victory because it means that President Kabila won't try to run for a third time and that he will respect the Constitution. Now, international NGO, Human Rights Watch, wanted to underline the fact that Shadary was recently sanctioned by the European Union for human rights violation.
Thomas Nicolon there for us. Now, there are growing concerns about a crackdown on opposition figures in Zimbabwe in the wake of last week's disputed presidential election. On Wednesday, a top official in the MDC party was denied asylum by Zambia after he fled there amidst mounting claims of harassment by the state. Tendai Biti is a former finance minister and is amongst those who publicly accused President Mnangagwa of having stolen the vote.
It's been nearly a week since election results were announced in Zimbabwe, yet the political drama is far from over. The opposition MDC alliance has confirmed it will challenge Emmerson Mnangagwa's victory in court.
Results have now been announced. We've gone through those results. My client's view is that those results reflect a total negation of the will of the people. The results is announced.
Emmerson Mnangagwa of the ruling ZANU-PF party won last week's presidential election with 50.8% of the vote, avoiding a runoff against his main opponent Nelson Chamisa. The opposition, however, says Chamisa was the winner and that the results were manipulated. The MDC has until Friday to file a court application, which the Constitutional Court must then examine within 14 days. The move comes amid a growing government crackdown on the opposition. MDC headquarters were raided by authorities on Friday, and the police are hunting for 9 senior opposition officials accused of inciting violence during protests last week. Tendai Biti, a former finance minister, was briefly detained this Wednesday as he was trying to cross to neighbouring Zambia to seek asylum. International observers, meanwhile, have denounced a climate of fear in Zimbabwe. Human Rights Watch reporting multiple cases of beatings and harassment in the capital, Harare. On Tuesday, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also warned against escalating violence, urging Emmerson Mnangagwa to rein in his security forces.
Former Ivorian First Lady Simone Gbagbo is out of prison. She had been serving a 20-year jail term for the role she played in post-electoral violence in 2010, when her husband, Laurent Gbagbo, refused to accept the victory of current leader Alassane Ouattara. On Monday, Ouattara pardoned Mrs. Gbagbo as one of 800 prisoners linked to the electoral crisis who were freed. He said the move was in a bid to promote national reconciliation. Political divisions still run deep, and those supporters of the Gbagbo's Ivorian Popular Front Party have welcomed the amnesty, some still see it as a sign that their party is still being persecuted by the ruling coalition.
They told us we didn't have political prisoners, but today you saw that we went from 0 to 800, so there were political prisoners. That was to silence the FPI.
We hope that by the will of the Ivorian people, we will be in power.
We hope that this release will result in the arrival of President Gbagbo.
Well, Laurent Gbagbo is currently on trial in The Hague. About 3,000 people were killed in the post-electoral clashes, and human rights groups have slammed the release of those accused of rights abuses. Simone Gbagbo was accused of helping coordinate attacks on Ouattara's supporters.
A former First Lady of the Ivory Coast who spent the last 7 years behind bars for undermining state security. Simone Gbagbo is now walking free once more after being pardoned by the president Alassane Ouattara earlier this week.
This amnesty will benefit around 800 of our citizens. Among them is Madame Simone Gbagbo. I invite all beneficiaries of this amnesty to ensure that our country never again relives such events and never sinks into violence again.
Ouattara's amnesty applies to citizens who were sentenced for offences relating to the 2010-2011 post-election crisis. Simone was one, arrested in 2011, accused of crimes against humanity. A formidable politician in her own right, she had been given a 20-year prison sentence over her suspected involvement in an attack at Abidjan's Abobo market. The 69-year-old is said to have ordered several assassinations to keep her husband in power after the 2010 election. At the time, Laurent Gbagbo refused to recognise the victory of opponent Ouattara. The crisis that followed led to more than 3,000 deaths in 5 months. Laurent Gbagbo remains on trial in The Hague. The question of national reconciliation has dogged Ouattara's presidency. With 2020 elections on the horizon and relations between rival parties strained, the amnesty for Simone Gbagbo and the hundreds of others could ease some of the political tension.
Well, in Burkina Faso, Lake Buku, one of the country's natural water reservoirs, is drying up. Climate change and drought have sent water levels plummeting. The lives and livelihoods of the tens of thousands of people who make up nearby communities are under threat. Our correspondents report.
Spread over 17 kilometres, Lake Buku is the lifeblood of Bozanga region, 150 kilometres away from Ouagadougou. But over the last decade, silt and sand have built up in parts of the lake, choking it up. Farmers' livelihoods are now at risk.
We're worried now because there isn't enough water for our crops. In the past, there was a lot of water, but not anymore because of the silt.
The lake's water level has dropped every year due to global warming and diminishing rainfall during the rainy season. These men are trying to trap the water in the lake by whatever means they can. Without water from the lake, they cannot develop economically.
We've made these dikes to combat the silt and to hold the water back until February next year.
More than half of the world's lakes and reservoirs hold nearly 90% of all surface liquid freshwater and are facing massive man-made and ecological threats. Local authorities have been concerned about Lake Buku for years and are hoping for government funding to build up residents' climate change resilience. At Bozanga Town Hall, the mayor is sounding the alarm.
The lake is in danger. The solution is to ensure that it is permanently filled, and so the lake must be cleaned to remove the sand and to give it a bit more depth, and at the same time to strengthen the banks so that the water can be contained.
Lakes are among the most vulnerable and difficult to restore of all natural ecological systems, but their plight remains widely ignored. Buku Lake, which means "my children are saved" in the local language, is destined to disappear if nothing is done. The growing global demand for water is set to put more pressure on natural lakes as the world population is expected to rise by nearly 2 billion people by 2025.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.